Hi, I'm Mitch Silverstein.
And I'm Stephanie Bone. We're with the New York State Pavilion Paint Project.
And you're listening to U.S. Modernist Radio.
Mama don't allow no architecture around here. Mama don't allow no architecture around here. Oh, I don't care what Mama don't allow, gonna draw mine modern anyhow. Mama don't allow no architecture around here.
Welcome to U.S. Modernist Radio, where we talk and laugh with people who enjoy, own, create, dream about, preserve, love, and hate modernist architecture, the most exciting and controversial buildings in the world. I'm Tom Guild. Nowhere in the world celebrates modernism better than Palm Springs, California. Each February, they have a huge architecture and design festival called Modernism Week, which actually goes on for 11 days. This was the 5th year U.S. Modernist has been at Modernism Week. We were talking poolside at the hip Hotel Skylark with nearly everybody, the keynote speakers, authors, and special guests. It's a tough job, but hey, it's our sacred architectural duty to serve the martinis.
The few, the proud, the modernists.
The ones who shake and stir. And we do so with pride and honor. It was my second time to come to Modernism Week, and I'm glad that this year, with better weather and no washed-out roads, Patricia and I were able to go up the tramway, which goes 8,000 feet above the desert floor and requires a wardrobe change. It's like 30 degrees cooler up there.
It is completely different.
Yeah, but the scenery is fantastic, and it's a must-see when you come to Modernism Week.
You can see out all over the valley. You can see the airport on a clear day. You can see 20, 30 miles.
You can see the Salton Sea.
Yes, you can.
Yeah.
Right, which is way down valley.
Yeah, and it's not actually an ocean.
No. Thank you, Tom. If you're into mid-century modernism, Modernism Week is the Super Bowl, the Olympics of all the architecture we love, an event not to be missed. When our modern-day Dorothys kick their red ruby slippers together, they don't go to Kansas. They end up at the Frey House 2 above the Palm Springs Art Museum, my favorite place in the world. Modernism Week is such an event of architecture, nonprofit benefit events, documentary premieres, amazing parties, house tours, art and architecture exhibits, and much more. Like if you go downtown along North Palm Canyon and start walking in some of the stores, if you're a guy, you're going to find some of the most unusual blazers in the universe.
Oh, yeah. I noticed that you had found a few yourself.
I have found a few. You can't wear these just anywhere. The volume of these is really high.
Well, if you wear them anywhere, you need to be prepared to explain where you got that thing.
They have a certain burst of color and texture. And you can find racks of these amazing blazers that you can wear to the parties that you're going to be going to during Modernism Week. It's pretty spectacular. If you'd like to go with us in February 2021 and stay at the U.S. Modernist compound, complete with our own swanky pool and the best frittatas in town, email me at george@usmodernist.org. U.S. Modernist Radio is underwritten by Nichiha.com/U.S. Modernist and by modernist realtor Angela Roll.
In a story that we are largely making up, modernist realtor Angela Roll worked her way through college, dancing like no one's watching to Mambo No. 5 and brilliantly flipping Neutra houses, sometimes simultaneously. At age 22, following a celebrity-filled party at a famous hillside modernist house in L.A. involving late-night swimming, fig-infused goat cheese, absolute lime, and a new use for graphite. Angela was recruited to architecture school. There, she spent years in sleep-deprived design studios. Now she's a modernist real estate agent with specialized design training advising buyers and sellers on everything from appropriate renovation to staging a martini party for 200 from 2,800 miles away. That's absolutely true. Reach her at angelaroll.com. That's ROEHL, or call her 919-995-0550.
Thank you, Tom. Craig Ellwood was one of the most exciting figures in American architecture. If he lived today, TMZ would be following his Ferrari all around L.A. He took California by storm, and no one since has fully captured his personal style or his incredible story and architecture. I talk with the Elwood whisperer, Barton Jahncke, who has brought more than one ailing Elwood house back to life, and his client Diane Bald, owner of the recently restored Hunt House in Malibu. Later on, we'll join two architects working on another Elwood house, Dangaran and Brett Woods. Let's go now to Palm Springs, poolside at the U.S. Modernist Compound. So, kicking us off here, I wanted to ask about someone that we lost recently, Ray Cappy. You went to school when Ray was running Skylark, right?
I did. But, I didn't have a lot of relationship with him, which was funny because he was running the school. But I ended up at his house one day, which I remember, which was just outstanding.
Oh, that's an incredible house.
Oh, my God. It was so beautiful, just with a very small group of students there. But I didn't have a lot of rapport with him, which was really funny. I mean, I was with Eric Moss.
Yeah.
Tom Main was my professor, and Michael Rotundi, and a lot of the other people. But Ray, somehow, I don't know why we weren't.
Pedagogical head.
Yeah.
Now, I always compare Skylark to kind of the Hogwarts of architecture schools. I mean,
Yeah, it
it
was
had a certain
amazing.
magic to it, right?
It was fantastic.
What was it like to study there?
Well, first of all, I had come from Canada.
Okay.
So I was from Toronto. I had gone to Carleton.
You're a foreigner, right?
I'm a foreigner. So I had gone to Carleton and studied architecture, and I was like, this isn't for me. And my best friend, who I had gone through drafting school at night, in high school, he came down to USC architecture, and he said, Diane, he said, there's really a perfect school for you called Skylark. You should really go there. So I applied to it, and I got in. So I came down in third year, and I completed my degree there. And I used to always wear a headband that I always wore, and they always called me the Urban Indian from Canada. So I had a reputation there, so they knew who I was. But it was an amazing school to go to. It was like nothing I had come from, and to work with all these great architects of the time that were actually working architects and teaching was a phenomenal experience.
On YouTube now, Skylark has put a lot of its lectures from the very early days.
Yeah.
A couple of them I have watched through its entirety. I believe Harwell Hamilton Harris came through the school a couple times. And this was like the Hollywood Bowl for architects.
Yeah, it was amazing. Everybody came
A lot
through
of
there.
Shelley Cappy interviews.
Yes.
It's funny because I live in Rustic Canyon by Ray, and then I live 2 doors from Harwell Hamilton Harris's Intenza house.
Oh, okay.
The international style house that basically the case study program was
Launched
discovered on
on.
the floor, and it's kind of that house. And Thornton Abel is interviewed as well, and his house is above me, and Shelley has a lot of interviews with Thornton at the house.
Oh, yeah.
And it was very casual, relaxed, kind of off the cuff with that family. And Ray and Shelley, amazing people who literally branched off from Pomona and made it out in an alternative way beyond what anybody would have thought.
Ray was one of those that got away from me. I had an interview scheduled with him, and it was about 4 weeks before he passed.
Sure.
Oh, sorry to hear that.
Well, I'd spent the past 2 years of his life photographing the house and being in the house and interviewing him. A friend of mine,
Nice.
and Frank Langan, actually,
Okay.
was very close with Ray and Shelley and used to take me up there and let me sit down and interview them and talk to them more so about not so much architecture, because we've all seen that and heard that, but about Santa Monica Canyon, Rustic Canyon, how they fell in love, the story of the family, and more on a personal side, which was really lovely to hear. And the most welcome people. She's still like charging
She's
forward,
amazing.
very chic, and
Yes.
always dressed properly and lovely, and great host, and just wonderful family. And the son Finn's amazing as well, who worked with his dad on all those projects until the very end.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, he was
Absolutely. And Ray was one of the few, if not the only, people to start an architecture school that would last. Almost all the rest of them were kind of utopian follies that would
Yeah,
maybe go
exactly.
2, 3, 5 years. I mean,
Sure.
even
Yeah.
in North Carolina, Black Mountain College, barely made it for a decade and really struggled there towards the end. But Skylark is very robust and financially
Amazing
successful.
What's going on?
Although
there now.
Robert Wilson is still pretty successful, so
Yeah. Yeah.
different category.
Yeah. And I remember seeing in interviews about Ray that he said his father was an accountant, I believe, and so he knew how to do books.
Wow.
And that was the secret of the school. It's just
Interesting.
knowing how to run the books.
Yeah.
I'm sure.
It was a skill
Benny
that most
business.
architects did not have.
Right.
No.
Exactly.
Now, you two have been a little busy working together.
We've been in cahoots together.
You have been in cahoots, big time.
A little bit.
So, which cahoot do we want to start with?
It's up to
talk about.
Well, in all honesty,
I think we should start with Hunt House.
sure. I mean, I will say Kirk Douglas, Diane, that's totally her baby.
Yeah.
Love everything. I mean, you got to look at it like she had done the house once when they moved in
Right.
quasi,
Staged
halfway,
it,
yes. And then at some point convinced the rest of the family that it was okay to take a little break and shut them out for 6 months or so. And so that's really what, I'm obviously always there for anything, but
Right.
that's really a Diane. And Jim Budman,
Yeah,
to
Jim
some
Budman.
extent, who was I'd call him like owner rep, client rep
Yeah.
in Malibu as well, where he was out on site double and triple checking and sending photos and videos of what was going on, because Diane was off site quite a
Right.
bit, so you end up having somebody who needs to filter, and Jimmy was almost
Pretty
to the
good.
point of like on it,
Yeah,
you know.
he has a wonderful eye,
Yeah.
so he was really able to pick up any things that were slightly off that needed to be
Right.
tweaked.
Yeah.
So let's start with the Hunt House.
Okay, great.
Okay, great.
So how did you come about finding that to? Because
This is best story.
Well, it's a funny story because Michael and I, about 10 years ago, we had gone out to Malibu. He was going paddleboarding with a friend, and we came back, and a very dear friend of ours, Norman Jewison, who's a very famous
Right.
filmmaker,
Sure.
director, lives on Malibu Road. And we thought, let's just go down the road and see. Maybe we could find a little beach house. Because we have an incredible little cabin in Algonquin Park in Ontario, Canada, that has no electricity, and it's 200...
Camp Tanaqua? Is that in part of the camp?
It's not part of the camp, but it's in the same area.
Okay.
And we have a beautiful cabin where we spend the summers there, and it's very simple. We call it voluntary simplicity. And no telephones, none of that stuff. So we thought, wouldn't it be great to kind of find the same thing by the ocean? So we drive down the street, and just as we're sort of going down the street, this guy is putting out a little sign on the front of the driveway.
Whiteboard with Sharpie.
Whiteboard, and it says, house for rent or sale. And then at the very bottom, Craig Elwood. And I say to Michael, we got to stop. We got to go. We gotta, and it's literally 10 o'clock. He's just putting the sign on the road. We walk into the house, and I'm like walking behind Michael, and I go, I love this house. I love this house. I have to have this house. I love this house. I've never seen anything so beautiful, because it was completely empty, but it was the most magnificent house I had seen. It was perfection in its simplicity.
Yeah.
And it wasn't a big mansion. It was 1,400 feet, just like we like, very small. And the owner was this guy from Transylvania. And who turns out was the caretaker of the house for the Hunt family.
Okay.
And I sort of hear bits and pieces. I guess you've probably heard more from Sharon, but I remember we ended up getting the house. It was so funny because we were going away we were actually coming out to the desert for a week. And I said to Jim Budman, Jim, you got to work on this guy. We got to get this house. And so we started talking to him, and we had a very good rapport with him, but there were probably 50, 60 people that came by who wanted that house. And I don't know what it was, but he liked us.
Nice.
And we were really lucky. We get the house to rent. Tashin had been looking at it to buy it.
Mm-hmm.
Like, he was seriously interested in buying it. But by the grace of God, Jim had done his magic on him, and we ended up getting the house. So we lived there for probably, we were there for 4 years.
Leasing.
And he was, I said, do you happen to have any furniture from this house? And he said, yeah, I have a whole warehouse of furniture.
Oh, man.
So,
That's the magic question.
That's the magic question. So I said, well, maybe we could bring some back in the house if you don't mind. He said, sure. So I think, Jim, did you go out there?
I did.
Jimmy goes out there, and we get the 2 original coconut chairs, we get the Eames chair, we get the couch, we get the dining table, we get everything. It's not in great shape.
How good a day was that when you walked in that warehouse?
That was amazing. And then
You're halfway there on
it
the
was
story,
amazing.
though. It's
And
good.
then he had the bunk beds were in the house, which were magnificent. I love the bunk room. And then there were 2 stools that were still at the bar. So, everything had sort of come back to the house, and it was fantastic. And then he, within a very short period of time, he decides he's leaving. He's selling the house. And we unfortunately couldn't buy it at the time. And so I was like devastated. And he ends up selling the house. He sells the house to a developer. And the developer's planning to tear the house down. And so I packed my bags, and I always had told my daughter, I said to Alex, who's a filmmaker, I said, Alex, you should really do a film about your mother, and she's madly in love and having an affair, but it's not with a man, it's with a house.
Yeah.
That's how much I love that house.
Yeah.
So anyway, so he ends up selling the house. I pack it up, and then the guy who's bought the house, he says, you know what? I have a lot of plans for this house. I'm going to be in planning with the Coastal Commission probably for 4 or 5 years.
Okay.
So you might as well just stay.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's year 4. So then we end up staying to year 8. And then he says to me, I'm never going to get this house built. They're never going to allow me to do it. And plus, our neighbor was not happy because he was planning to put a swimming pool on the roof that looked into her living room.
Oh, great.
And he wasn't prepared.
Everyone loves that.
Yeah, he wasn't really prepared
For the fight?
For the fight to move it 40 feet, take off 40 feet of the pool. So long story short, and she's begging me to buy the house. Buy the house. You can do anything you want to that house. Please buy the house. So we end up, he says to me, I'm never going to be able to build what I can build. I'm coming to Toronto. Let's make a deal on the house.
Yeah.
So long story short, we make a deal with him, and we get the house. So we've had the house for 3 years now.
So you consummate the affair.
The affair. And we get the house, and it's like, wow, I can't believe we got this house. And then,
baby.
Baby, we got the house. But then the house starts to look sadder and sadder every day. A house just gets to a point where it's just beyond repair. It suddenly feels old one day. It's always looked pretty good, and then suddenly you just go, oh my God, this house needs help.
Yeah.
So it definitely was time to restore the house. We had no choice. And I'd gotten everybody in the family on board that we were going to restore the house. So the problem was to find the person who could help restore the house.
So how did you go about finding that person? Did you beam a light up in the sky?
Well,
and
I'm
Barton
sort of
came.
No, they sent Jim Budman out into the territory, into the Netherlands, and he basically, honestly, brokered the deal.
Yeah,
okay.
He really did.
The deal.
He really did. We had met with a couple of people. One particular person who knew Craig Elwood very well, his designs, and had worked on many homes, and that did not work. So then I was feeling very desperate because I said, I have to start this project in October or November. We've got to do it. I'd cleared the house out, and I had met this well-known contractor who did all of the homes in Malibu pretty much. And so I had been talking to him. I knew he wouldn't get the detailing right. He did not have the aesthetic for it. He just wouldn't have been the right person. But I was so desperate, I thought, this is the guy I'm going to probably sign a contract with. And then we had looked a year before at the Smith House, because we always loved looking at architecture and homes. And it was really in disrepair. And, we just looked at it out of curiosity to see if it was something we were interested in. But we ended up not being interested in it. But it was interesting to see the house. And Jim calls me and he says, Diane, you won't believe this. I just went up to the Smith House.
No, he was there.
Oh,
he was in the living room. This is an interesting
Okay, so
bit,
he was in the living room at the Smith House. And it had all been redone.
Yeah, and George, you've been there.
And you have to meet the guy who did this because he's the right guy for the Malibu house. And I guess...
So Jim came up with, Jim Budman comes up to the house, and we're sitting in the living room, and he's walking around and says, by the way, my family has just purchased the Hunt house, and they've been there for a while trying to figure this out. And, it's so nice to meet you. This is amazing. We had been to the Smith house before, and before it was restored, you did such a great job, et cetera, et cetera. And then, oddly enough, it was the end of summer, I believe, and Jim Tyler, who was basically my mentor, who was in the office for Elwood from 65 till it closed in 79.
Yeah.
Who, had worked with Pereira, Koenig, everybody, Lautner, and basically knows everything about architecture. He was out of the LA 12. He was the +1 in the LA 12. And
the fifth Beatle.
The fifth Beatle, pretty much.
Have you ever interviewed him?
Oh, yeah. He was here last year.
And over the summer, he spends his summers in Salt Lake, and he had literally just come back to town. And as I'm sitting in the living room, Jim Budman here has Diane on the telephone on one line, and all of a sudden my phone rings, and I look at it and it says Jim Tyler, and he says, "Hey, kid, I'm back." And I said, "Well, wait a minute, we're going to have to do this." And then literally Jim said, "Okay, tomorrow morning you guys are at Diane's house, 8:39. They're leaving in the afternoon. You got to come out here and meet them." So I said, "Jim, we got to go to somewhere in the morning." So we woke up in the morning, popped up at the house. These guys are in their sweats and flip-flops, hanging out with their kids and making breakfast and serving muffins and coffee. And the gig usually goes where I drag Jim Tyler along with me. We sit down on the sofa, everybody gets introduced, and I look at him and say, "All right, Jim, go." And he just starts, and he just rolls off the stories.
He's so good.
This is a guy who was friends with the Eames. They babysat each other's kids. I mean, he and Pierre taught at 27 years in USC together. Yeah. He finished Pierre's last house with La Fetre. I mean, this is history sitting in a living room, and I think that charmed, obviously, everyone, and everybody falls in love with this man. And then Diane called that afternoon and said, I think this could work. Just send some stuff over, what you'd like to do, and then we'll go from there. Yeah. And literally, that was it.
Yeah. So now you're in this torrid affair, and your lover here needs a little work. So how do you figure out how to approach this? Because I know with just a regular house that has any age on it, it's kind of a mess. But now you've got this Ellwood house, which is very special. How do you go about the process of diagnosing it and figuring out what you're going to do?
Well, as you know, in any type of restoration, you can't really diagnose what you're going to do until you do the open heart surgery.
Yeah.
That's great.
So
just crack the chest and
you
start.
just, I was looking at Barton's original contract, and it was for 4 months.
I think it was ready to have a massive heart attack.
And we hadn't even started by 4 months. So anyways, but, it's one of those things that as you unpeel it, it reveals itself. And fortunately, we knew that we'd had the structural engineer there, and the structure was sound. So that was a good starting place. And then we knew, I knew that the staircase was about to fall in, and I didn't realize how literally it was about to fall down. I had sort of looked, and on the side stringer, I had seen a massive crack. So intuitively, I just had a workman just, create a sort of brace under it. And that held it for for probably a good 5 years.
Yeah.
And by the end, I kept saying to the kids, "Now listen, no parties on the deck. You can't have more than 4 people and one person at a time going down the stairway."
It was like a jacked up car in the driveway, literally. And
Yeah.
I will say, just to roll back really quickly, something very fortunate happened right after the job. All that furniture that had been taken away after Diane and was sold, a gentleman who's friends with, that I'm friends with, Brent Lewis at Heritage, called me and said, "I heard you got that job, Barton. I have their furniture."
Right, because we missed that part of the story.
And I said,
"Oh yeah, that's a good part."
The guy from Transylvania
took it all out. Yeah.
When he sold the house, he took everything out, including the blender that went into the new tone countertop. Why would you take that if you left the device
and
that,
he also
that
took
runs it?
He didn't even return
He didn't return my deposit of $20,000. Luckily, I had bought the bunk beds and the stool for $2,500 from him.
Yeah.
But he sort of ran out of town very quickly.
Yeah.
And then everything got sold to a dealer, and it was quiet for 4 years.
Literally.
Nobody heard where was the furniture, who got the furniture. Nobody knew.
So this goes back away. So when were you originally renting? What year was it that you first were renting there?
So we started renting that house probably 11 years ago. So I think it was 2010. It was 2010.
So quite a while you've been involved
10 years,
here.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And then by the grace of God, he called Barton.
And I said, "Call Diane." I said, "Let's get this done." And he said, "Well, it's been marketed, so we'll have a little luncheon for you, but we'll make sure that Diane can have everything she would like, obviously, because it's her furniture."
Yeah, they were good about it.
And he said as well, "I've got every magazine, book, plan, original plan, blueprint, handwritten letter, scribble pages, prescription lists." I mean, it was literally the treasure trove of everything Hunt from the day one, I'd say. And you look at that, and then it allows you to, and he brought it to the house. Nobody was at the house yet. I had just taken on the project, and we looked at it, and he said, "You can have it. You can go through it because I know that you're going to need to use this, and I'm going to have to take it from you for at least a month." So we kind of started out that way.
Yeah.
And it did lead us to be able to make choices that were original intent. Like the first set of drawings, we went all the way back to there where we could say, let's put the steel handrails in versus
that were originally put in the house but never were done.
Budgetary reasons probably back then with materials.
And then that beautiful chimney.
We remade everything was hand fabricated on the
gorgeous.
house again. And the guys that do the work were Ramiro Nateras. He runs a company called K&M that's done most of my projects with me, who's a young contractor who's pretty much the craftsman in town right now. And he was able to fabricate everything. And anything that came off of the house, they literally would repurpose. So if a beam came down or some decking, it would become a windowsill or it would become a threshold.
Yeah,
or
and
it
the
would
cross-bracing that had these incredible hangers, like fully refinished and then reused. And
everything was readapted.
It was
so the house is a
fantastic.
pure, true restoration in the sense that because of having worked on 3 Craig Ellwood houses that were built between 56, 7, and 8, all the wood that we had used on 2 other houses we pulled, and we have a warehouse that we throw all the materials, cover plates, light switches, cans, grills, anything in. So Diane's house, the Hunt house, got the benefit of everything. Free of charge.
We brought everybody to the beach. The Smith house.
And literally, so probably the same mahogany from the same lumber yard. Probably, everything is literally from the same store from 3 houses. And she has the purest Craig Ellwood house, for sure, in the world.
Oh.
Yeah, there's just no getting around that. It is the original house was built back again.
There's a great deal of luck and synchronicity here in this story.
Yeah.
Because this is not most people's experience.
No.
They just they can't
This
find.
was a meant to be story.
It was a meant to be story. It was definitely out in the ethos there, and
there are challenges.
ethers and
There are
yeah.
challenges, though. You go to deal with a city who's not Malibu doesn't have a lot in place historically. They have the Lautner Ed's house that LaFetre did down in the colony.
But I think that's why we had some problems. We did definitely have some holdups with the city. They were very challenging, and I don't know if it was because we weren't using local contractors.
Malibu Mafia.
Because Shauna and Edward's house was used.
Yes.
They used local contractors.
As well,
and
they
I think
didn't
there was a little bit of that.
They also didn't understand a lot of the energy codes that relate to, it's called Title 24, Part 8, which is a California Historical Building Code, which they were not familiar with and did not want to adhere to, where it's a discretionary measure, where it's meant to be discretionary to err on the owner's side and the homeowner's side, where they're supposed to say, I can let you get away with single pane glass, or I can let you get away with not over-insulating the house and ruining the roof line. And instead, they chose to weaponize it a little bit. And I understand for protective reasons, and they had just gone through fires and were on the beach, and there's a lot of environmental things as well. But it is that house. It was the house in Malibu at the Malibu city offices that was on the wall as the photograph for years. It's known as that house. I can't leave the house once a week, twice a week on a job site where there's not somebody on the hill across the street shooting down over the fence and trying to get in the house.
I'm sure.
And and I think that also, I'll throw that back to you, is Diane has decided to literally become the steward of, 2 houses this year. But, the house we went and got landmarked right away and put on, or at least put on the National Register of Historic Places right away. And brought Katie in, Horak, and she was able to do that, where Diane said, fine, is it going to limit me, handcuff me? No, you're going to keep the house anyway at your home. And went and did it. And what it does is it sets a standard. It puts a bar out there that says, this is how it's supposed to be. And,
well, I knew that.
lucky.
I knew the Hunt house. I was meant to be the custodian when I walked in that house.
I
and I
remember
just
that.
sort of had to almost surrender and let it go, because I knew it would sort of end up back to me. And
it'll never be torn down.
It will never be torn down, and I feel so good about that, because it's probably one of the purest Elwood houses left, and so we're really, really proud of it.
The amount of dedication that it takes to this, it's not cheap, certainly, but the amount of dedication that you have to put into this is really considerable. And now that it's the Hunt house is pretty much done, is that correct?
98.
98%.
In life, if you can do 85% of anything
Yeah.
home-wise, there's always 15% of wiggle room when you finish a job.
Yeah.
This house is more in the 95 to 98% finished. They're doing little bits and bobs that we, need to make a garage clean enough to be able to do laundry in and feel like it's still chic at the same time.
Sure.
So there are little things, but for the most part, the lower main structure is
It's
just
done.
finished.
Yeah, it's
done.
beautiful.
Is there going to be a publication that people can see photos of this in the next 6 months
several.
or so?
Yeah, well, I've kept a log of the construction on Instagram, so that's the hunthouse_Malibu. So that's
Hunthouse_Malibu.
So that's showing the whole process of the restoration.
Okay.
And Barton is...
I tend to back off a little bit with that. These are client homes. It's their home to show off. And, I think that, it is a private thing. And because Diane and Michael are going to be keeping the home, there's a moment, there's a window that you grab after the job where, all the magazines line up, all the editorial, all the stories, because people do need to see and understand. And you do it, and then you let people have their house back.
Right.
And you just say, go live off the radar again, and it should be that way. It's a special moment. You might not want to live with the small furniture for the rest of your life, but it looks great in the photos. And
it does.
It's original, and you kind of want to stick to that. And then it needs to take on its, fourth life at this point. So, and it'll get another 50 years out of the house,
oh my
probably.
God, the way
at least.
the way they did it
I
was
walked through when I was walking
unbelievable.
through it. I was just amazed at the details of the house.
The details were
and
amazing.
the quality of the guys that were working on it.
They're so
Normally, I walk
fantastic.
through a renovation of a modernist house, even with some of the firms that are very good, and people are just sort of kind of connecting with each other. This was like the Navy SEALs had descended on this house, and they were all just
They're all very young, under 40. Shirtless
They were
surfers, pro volleyball
amazing
players
guys.
with top knots and beards that have grown for a month and a half. They're all it's those guys.
I
Is
got
there
a-
a calendar
I got a
that
lo-
people can buy of this?
Listen, I got a lot of comments on Instagram. My girlfriends were calling me up and they were going, "God, I got to come and see the house because that guy with his shirt off looks pretty awesome."
And they're very, and they're lovely. So, and Diane kind
And
of,
they were all so they
Pride.
had vested interest in it.
Yeah.
They weren't
There is
just
pride of
there
ownership on
doing
their part.
work. There was a lot of pride of ownership, and you could tell it in everything they did. It was a magnificent process to watch. I have to say.
They look at me and say, "Okay, what do you want us to do?" And then Diane turns up, and they all get light and sweet, and she does mother hen on everybody and sends sweatshirts so they're warm and maple cookies from Canada, and it turns into a family affair. And I think that's.
I understand you have access to sweatshirts. Is that correct?
There's no shortage.
But it is one of those moments, and the guys really did appreciate that feeling of having that camaraderie as well.
Yeah,
And,
I really appreciated it. I just couldn't believe. I'm an architect. I've been on plenty of job sites, but I'd never seen that degree of
It's not always that way.
Yeah.
No,
And
it's
it's
just
not.
beautiful. And, granted, we could have probably had a bigger crew and gotten through the process a
course.
lot faster. They were so proprietary on what they did. I kept saying, can't you bring in 2 more guys to help you? And no, everybody had their place. But, we worked with amazing people. And I almost want to call them artists because we worked with Tim Brooks, who touched every single piece of wood.
Tim Brooks is the cabinet maker, and he's done every
incredible.
one of my jobs.
He
And
is
he
an
literally,
artist.
from New York, built basically a lot of the hotels, nightclubs, everything. He's a handmade guy.
Yeah.
And he had done every 4 or 5 jobs with me before. He's doing work in Palm Springs for Diane now. He's doing everything. And then Ryan Soniat,
who's amazing.
does a lot of fixtures and finishes with us. And he was able to replicate and fabricate, because, you have to have a fabrication shop basically in these jobs. And every light, every faucet, every toilet. And, this house, we sourced out all Crane Dreyfus stuff for the house, so
Which was
fixtures and
original.
finishes, which was original and called out in the spec book, which we had. So we were able to, troll that and deep dive. And he did it all.
He did it, and he said it's the only house in California that
With
has
all
3
crane.
suites of
full crane.
Full crane. So that was pretty
Original.
great.
And it's beautiful.
It
you
is.
know?
Beautiful.
It's beautiful. And there's a
Beautiful.
patina still to things. When we did things, we would make sure that they were hand painted and they weren't, overly sprayed or, anything
too
wasn't
cleaned
powder
up.
coated. It still has a handmade feel and a little rough around the edges.
And the knobs are all still chipped
Original.
in.
We didn't paint
original. We
over
didn't
any of the brass black and
refinish
all the
that.
hand, doorknobs and everything. Because we have buckets of these things that you rip off of the
Oh,
houses.
sure.
And, knowing that Diane was going to keep the house, you can give it the goods. You're not
Yeah.
selling a house to save it.
Right.
You're
You're not just trying to throw on the look. And,
Yeah,
and be
Exactly.
That's right.
Exactly.
Well, you guys, we could talk about this all
Oh,
day,
yeah, I know.
but this is
Kirk Douglas is the
this-
next phase for me.
Well, I'm going to wrap up here talking about for the legacy of Craig Elwood. So my question to the two of you is, now that this house has been restored, there are other houses of his around L.A. and other places. We had one recently that burned down that, Barton, you're going to be bringing
Rebuilding,
back to life.
ground up, yep.
And where else do we need to be concerned? What's the next places that we
for
need
myself,
to be looking at? Yeah.
I'm doing that, and I'm doing two more at the
Okay.
moment. I'm going to help Case Study 16, was just sold right off the bat. A friend who's an owner, who's a huge fan of architecture in general, decided to buy it, and he needs some freshening. The house
Okay.
is in pretty good condition, so I'm going to work on the surfaces and finishes and bring back all the materials to make it look correct. And then there's the Hale house in Beverly Hills, which has sat for 31 years, and the only reason I know that is because a neighbor said that's been sitting for 31 years. So that
love
is
that
in
house.
a terrible
needs some
condition, and that's going to be a full peel historical.
That was the
down to
one the Packards owned?
correct.
Yeah.
Still does. Yes.
Okay.
Who I'll probably not cross paths with very
Yeah.
much. He lives up north, but it's one of those moments where it's an opportunity, and Ramiro is going to looking at doing that. And
Fantastic.
it's a long process, that one. It's
Well-
Garrett Ekbo background. I mean,
Oh,
it's
yeah.
all good,
Well, thank you so much. Both of you are very special friends of U.S. Modernists, and it's so nice to see you every year when we come out here. And keep going. Keep falling in love,
Thank
Diane.
you.
'cause-
Next
I will.
house, Diane.
I've
What's the
gotta-
next house,
I've got
Diane?
to I need to find the next one.
We just have to hide Michael, and then
Exactly.
we can
And my husband
find the
goes,
next
"You've
house.
got 5
well,
houses
actually,
in
you know what we need to
California."
do? We need to send Jim Budman, who's sitting here with us, out to find another house.
Exactly.
Right.
It'll actually happen.
Oh, I'm
properly.
sure.
And let me tell you, this is the nexus of it all right here, sitting at the table with us. So
Yes.
we are
I'm
very
just
fortunate.
randomly in L.A. one day, and I run into Jim. So
That's right.
That was a nice moment.
He's the man about town. He's
He
the
is.
ambassador.
He is. He's
of
the
Venice
mayor
and
of Venice, I
Mayor of
call
Venice,
him, literally.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, he's holding it down on the west side of L.A.
Sure.
Yeah.
all right. Thanks, guys.
Thanks,
Thank you so
George.
much.
That was the Elwood Whisperer, Barton Jahncke, and Diane Bald talking about the recently restored Hunt House in Malibu.
And now, a moment of reflection from Nietzsche.
Beauty, love, durability, designed to last for years to come, bringing you peace and tranquility. You feel relaxed, knowing your house can easily achieve any exterior look and any color. Wood, concrete. Your house loves feeling this good, and you love feeling this good. Nietzsche, 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 Nietzsche. Say it with me. Nietzsche. Advanced engineering. Nietzsche, Nietzsche. Durability, textures, finishes, and colors. Visit Nietzsche.com/US Modernist. Nietzsche, Nietzsche, Nietzsche. That's N-I-C-H. Wait for it. A look you'll love. Nietzsche.
Can't get enough Craig Elwood? Coming up, George and I talk to architects Joe Dangaran and Brett Woods.
We're rolling? Yep. All right. You want to get up a little closer there?
Very cool. It's pretty amazing what you've done. We actually, part of one of the reasons we were excited to chat with you today is that we use your site a lot, actually. When we, yeah, a lot of our projects, when you type in...
a handful of our homes are on your website.
Yeah, which I know you know a few of them, but we actually look back through and we wanted to touch on a few others that we've had the, I guess, fortune of working on and seeing on your website. But
well, let's start. Tell us what you've been working on that we know about.
Well, we're just up around the corner at the
Brown House. I think that's
Robert Brown House,
the Buff and Hensman.
Oh yeah.
So we've been contracted on that one for about a year and a half now. Just met with the client. We're about to actually break ground on that house. It's great. The client is really interested and committed to making sure that the architecture really is consistent and kind of in the spirit of what Buff and Hensman really wanted for out here in the desert and for that home. We're taking it down to the studs, and we're going to rebuild it, and it's going to be beautiful. So we're excited.
That's always so fun when you can come into a project that is exciting to begin with.
Oh, yeah.
And then add so much more to it.
Absolutely. Well, we always, clients may or may not, this client did know what they were purchasing, but some clients don't. And so when we get on, to a job walk or something and see these homes, that we always talk about whether or not a home has good bones. And this specific Buff and Hensman house has a really beautiful architectural partie and diagram, and so it's gonna be a really nice one. That happens to be here in Palm Springs.
I mean, the setting doesn't hurt either. I mean, the views off of that house are just incredible, and obviously with the descending slope, there's no other homes around you, which is really nice.
So that's one. What are some of the other ones that you've worked on that we might know of?
So I think you know about the Moore House, which is Craig Ellwood home that we're working on up in Los Feliz in Los Angeles. So that's an exciting one for us. Another one that we haven't had a chance to work on, but that's on your site that I actually personally drew in school with ink and Mylar, is the Hale House, the Craig Ellwood 1950 Hale House, which is on the site, which unfortunately is in pretty bad disrepair right now. We'd love to find a client that be interested in that and try to restore it.
Where's that one?
That one is in Beverly Hills, actually.
Oh, really?
Yeah, that one's in Beverly Hills.
That sounds like teardown country, really.
Well, and
unless
that's
somebody comes in and rescues it.
Exactly, and I think that's a lot of our clients. This is their passion, right? They see a home. They may or may not know what they're responding to, but they know it has value, and they're inspired to purchase these properties, even if they're 1,000 square foot for a couple, 2-bedroom, 1.5 bath. They want to help save these projects, and we love being a part of that process.
That was $1,000 a square foot?
No, 1,000 square feet. Some of these homes are. Okay. Some do end up spending $1,000 a square foot to try to bring these homes back to life, depending on.
Right. Well, I mean, Morehouse, for instance. Yeah. I mean, it's a 1,700 square foot Elwood, and that is coming in.
Well, it's coming in high. The owner. So on that specific home,
high.
the Morehouse, they're.
But they know that, right?
They do. They know it, and
they know that going in.
Well, they know it going in, and they know that these homes, they have a strong architectural history and presence, and not just the architect that worked on them, but also the design itself. And oftentimes the Morehouse was built in 1965, and it was built out of, this one happens to be wood. This happens to be one of Craig Ellwood's handful of wood structures, so it's not a steel frame, and the roof is failing. You have mold on the interior of the drywall, and doors and windows are leaking, and so you really have to pull these systems. You have to take the house apart and then put it back together, and our goal is to make these last another 50, 100 years. And with the technology we have today, that's the challenge, is kind of integrating new technology into these existing homes and structures. But that's the fun challenge.
Are there any particular problems with Elwood houses that are kind of unique to them? Because I know that a lot of the houses require sometimes such structural renovation. I mean, you really have to almost take them completely apart and then build them as if they were new.
Yes.
Because they were never destined to last forever necessarily, and the technology at the time was not particularly advanced.
Yes. Well, Brett and I were talking in the car driving up here, that we look back with this kind of lens, or architects, I say, we as an industry now look back at mid-century modernism, a lot of these homes, and recognize how revolutionary the design was, but then the technology, as you mentioned, isn't there to really stand up to some of the design moves that were made. And so roofing, I mean, goes down to waterproofing oftentimes with a lot of these. Another home that's on your site that we were able to work on was the Craig Elwood Seigler residence, which is in, it's up above Sunset Plaza in Los Angeles. And
It's West Hollywood.
yeah, and the whole reason we were brought in is because the roof failed, the roof was being replaced, and then a huge rainstorm came through and the entire home got
This
water
sounds
damage.
like this
It's
is the
terrible.
architect writing checks the engineer can't cash.
Yeah.
Or whatever that phrase I've.
Well, I think Joe's right. I think the challenge really kind of speaking to what are the challenges, on some of these mid-century homes. I think the biggest would be we're trying to take these homes to another level, right? And I think, unfortunately, some of them were built so quickly and they were framed at a different time where these tolerances at an eighth of an inch or half of an inch, they really don't work in these homes. So really you're stripping these houses back and you're actually coming back in and you're fixing all the kind of roof joists to make sure that eighth inch reveal or half inch reveal actually works on top of the ceiling, because again they were never built or intended to be designed to kind of this level and quality that we're trying to take them to today.
Right, we're on a lot of these homes now, and I think the industry, especially in Southern California, I think with the architects and the builders that are practicing right now, we're talking about tolerances of finishes coming together, eighth inch reveals, 16th inch reveals, and that's very, very difficult when you have an existing floor that may be from one end of the home to another 80 feet away. It's an inch and a half out. So how do you? So it's not just actually a huge part of what we do is trying to find and establish great relationships with builders, who a lot of them happen to either be trained architects and get into construction, but are kind of up for the challenge of these tolerances.
Making right angles where there weren't any before.
And they maybe in 1965 it wasn't a right angle. So
or actually fabricating a lot of the things that are in the house because the manufacturers don't exist anymore.
None of them.
Or it's not something that's been on the market for 30 years.
Well, that's always the question: is how far do you take it, right? I mean, you go through the floor plan, you look at what was existing, and every client, and I think we're all motivated to kind of put it back together the way it was conceived by the architect. I think the challenge becomes as you start going down that road, you can kind of get into these dead ends where you start kind of chasing this brand to put it back in the house because it was there once before. However, maybe that's just not the technology that needs to be in the house today. So you have to.
And you're making a house that in 10 years is going to need work again.
Exactly. Well, hopefully not in 10 years. Hopefully it's timeless enough to transcend the next 10, 20 years. I think that is the beauty about a lot of these mid-century homes is that spatially they are timeless. But they were built so quickly and with a cheaper kind of quality. They weren't intended to be these kind of jewelry pieces that they are today.
Yeah. This was the case all over the country. In Sarasota, Florida, these Paul Rudolph houses, went up, and no one was thinking beyond 15, 20 years. They were thinking they'd all get washed away or somebody would destroy them or whatever. They were just little experiments by somebody, and it's so great now that there's so much attention on these houses. Our motto is, you can't save something unless you know where it is.
Right.
So we're trying to be the red alert system for people like you and realtors and so forth to be able to find these things and keep an eye on them. So when it goes vacant or gets damaged or has some crazy person in it that you're watching over it.
Right, sure. Well, it's also it's also the equivalent here would really be, specifically in Orange County and in kind of Northern California, would be Joseph Seigler, right?
Yes, right.
Very similar, right? I mean, I grew up and kind of in the shadows of Joseph Seigler's and formally they're beautiful, right? And I think the challenge is over time they're wood structures and they need love. And I think oftentimes you have to find the right person that is committed to put the money into this structure and bring it back to life. And I think you see a lot of Joseph Seigler's everywhere, and there's a really kind of a nice movement, especially in Orange County area, Old Orange, where a lot of these Joseph Seigler's have been brought back, and people are committed, and like you said, kind of the watch party over a lot of these homes and making sure they're being taken care of correctly. We're passionate about that. Obviously, it's something that we feel a responsibility for, especially living in LA and having the case study program so close to us.
Yeah.
Well, it's an interesting point because we feel that we've had our practice now 7 years, and we're having a lot of homes that are being completed. We've had a number completed already, but we're kind of having those, year 3 and 4 homes where we signed those. Those are now starting to be completed, and we feel it's our responsibility, along with, I think, the community of architects and designers in Los Angeles and Southern California, that this is our history, this is our architectural culture. And I think for a long time we felt that, as I've been in LA 20 years now since school, since Brett and I have known each other, but LA, I think, has always had maybe a little bit of a chip on our shoulder in terms of we know that there is a culture in LA. We're starting to get, Pritzker Prize winning architects for the last 20 years build some pretty substantial structures in LA. I mean, Peter Zumthor now, along with Renzo Piano and what they're doing at LACMA, along with the Broad downtown. I think LA is finally being internationally recognized, but those of us that have practiced in LA, specifically in the region, the case study movement, mid-century modernism, Richard Neutra, Schindler, even back to Green and Green and the Gamble House and whatnot. There's been a strong residential history, and we feel that it's our responsibility to be part of not just respecting that, but working with homeowners that make the financial investment and the risk in buying these homes to modernize them, to make sure that they last another 60, 70, 100 years, whatever that may be, because we do have that technology now. If
the material science has caught up with architecture in a way that it didn't before.
No question. No question. I think Palm Springs is a perfect example, right? I mean, Palm Springs really kind of leaned into the whole mid-century movement completely in this town. I think the flat roofs and kind of, the technology wasn't really ready for those conditions and taking water off of a building. And I think we have the technology today where these important structures need to be saved and rebuilt, and they will last longer because of the technology.
Yeah.
So my last question for the two of you.
Yeah.
Do you, either of you or both, have your eye on some little house that you're going like, I'm not telling anybody, client, about that. I'm going to get that one for me.
You mean besides the Hale house?
Yeah. That you just talked about.
I think
we won't tell anybody.
No, that's fair. I think it's a really good question. I think Brett and I drive around the city, whether we're between meetings or with our families. We both have kids, and we also want to expose them to the architecture and the kind of community that we're a part of. But I don't know if it's a specific home, as it is, you see something as you're driving down the street and you're like, oh, I'm going to flag.
No, I'm talking about a specific home that reaches out to you by the neck and grabs you and goes, this is it.
I don't have an answer right off the top of my head.
I don't either, actually. Believe it or not, that's sad, but I don't. There's so many that I love, and I don't know if they reach around and grab me by the neck, but...
So I'm putting a curse on the both of you now.
Well, you got to find one.
In the next 30 days, some house is going to do this to you, and you're going to go, damn that, George.
No, that's a really good question.
Which we hear that a lot.
Thank you.
Yeah.
For removing the curse.
this may not answer your question directly, but one thing, I was on your site a few days ago, and Motor Avenue is a pretty straight cut through from where I live in Culver City up to a lot of where our projects are. And every time I'm on Motor, I look to the west and I say, oh, that's a pretty interesting home. It's been messed up over the years, you can really see. And I saw that on your site, and it was actually Craig Elwood's first home.
Ah,
really? And it's on. I think it's the Helen House. Helen House. It's on Motor. I've driven past that over 100 times. I've never known it was an Elwood. And it's like, we look at those and we say, it's got great bones. I wish we could have an opportunity to fix them.
I agree with you. I think it's not a specific home. I think we look at all of those homes and we think, I wish somebody had the opportunity to buy this and let us just redo this and bring it back to life. Walking away from the client just a second ago up at Southridge, it was actually the first time Joe had been to the house since we started the process, and Joe looked at the client and said, this house is going to be amazing, genuinely, right? Mm-hmm. Because, when you're there, you're kind of overcome with the history of it, but also kind of the setting and knowing what it can look like when it's finished.
But when you see the house from the street, do you know all that you're going to have to do, or is it something that you discover as if you get the job?
No, that's another good question. I think that really depends on the specific design. And
I think the challenge is how much do you touch, right? I think when you touch one thing, it leads to another thing. And I think, oftentimes in discussions with clients, the original conversation is, we want to save this, this, and this. And then once we start peeling the layers back and this, and this no longer makes sense for the house, they just say, you know what, we're coming this far, we want to go the full way. And I think so we look at all these homes and think that we want to touch just about everything within reason. And now if you have a steel door and window package on the house, I would assume we want to probably preserve that. But I think for the most part, a lot of these need to be peeled back. We kind of know, we've done enough of these to know that you can try to save a lot of this, but for the most part, it's kind of a slippery slope.
Right, sure.
Right, of scope creep, right?
Right. Well, gentlemen, thank you so much for stopping by. It's been a pleasure to meet you in person, and I hope you find that special house in the next 30 days.
I'm going to be looking for it.
All right?
We'll check back.
Me too.
Yeah. Thanks, George.
Right.
Thanks.
Those were my guests, architects Joe Dangaran and Brett Woods, talking about their most recent Elwood restoration.
Stay tuned over the spring and summer as we bring you more shows from 2020's Modernism Week in Palm Springs. You want to hang out with us at the swanky U.S. Modernist compound at Modernism Week in February 2021? Email george@usmodernist.org. U.S. Modernist Radio is underwritten by Nichiha.com/US Modernist and by Angela Roll, your special agent for Modernist houses, 919-995-0550. Okay, George, take us out.
Visit usmodernist.org's massive archives to listen to our past shows, discover documentation of 7,000 significant modernist houses, and access 2.8 million pages of classic 20th century architecture magazines. U.S. Modernist Radio is produced by Soundtracks Recording Studio in Raleigh, North Carolina. Our theme song was produced by me, George Smart, and Robinson Earl. Cindy Stratton,
not a real name,
and Carrie Cesarino,
which is actually her real name,
research our wonderful guests. U.S. Modernist Radio is a production of Modernist Archive, a nonprofit educational archive for the documentation, preservation, and promotion of modernist residential design. I'm George Smart, and there's no Frank Sinatra tune that doesn't play well under the stars with a martini in Palm Springs. So we'll be back soon with another Fly Me to the Moon, I've Got You Under My Skin, Pennies from Heaven, Modernism Week edition of U.S. Modernist Radio. Cheers!